Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Living on the B-Side podcast, where I have invited and chat to amazing humans about life, business, and anything else in between with a bit of a twist. And that twist is music. So this is always very interesting to see the perspective and answers of every person I have on for chats. Now, in this episode, I have the wonderful Lisa Baker, who I've known for about 18 months. We share the same community, and yes, we've seen each other grow, and I just couldn't resist to ask her to come on because she does something really amazing, and I'll get her to talk about that a little bit more. But first of all, hello, Lisa. How are you going? Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Birgit. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so excited.
Yes, I am too. It's going to be really, really good, I think, because you've got some amazing stuff doing in your life that is actually evolved around music. So that will be really exciting. But first off, let me talk a little bit about who you are and what you do. And I do have some notes here. So if you see me look down, that's me trying to remember. And then you can add on anything else that you believe is important at the end, just in case I might have missed something or twisted something a little bit in the wrong way. So you are the founder of the Elemental Dancer, and this is a global online space for Highland Dancers and Teachers to talk about, your technique, the training, and anything else that there is involved in that particular dancing space. And you've actually created a community called Highland, or you want to do Highland Dancing differently together. And I love that. That sounds really amazing. Now, you obviously, and I did not know this, so when I read this, I'm like, oh, wow. You were a chemical engineer. I knew that because we talked about that in our community, and a 50-time state and national champion in Highland Dancing. Why did you never mention that to me? So yes, that's Lisa. Anything I've missed, anything you want to highlight, or just sort of maybe go a little bit deeper into, please feel free to share.
Yeah. Oh, look, Birgit, I mean, thank you very much for what you were saying. It's funny. It's funny to me to hear you say you didn't know that. I started Highland Dancing when I was 5, and I won my first state championship when I was 9. And my whole life was, going to school and practicing dancing, to, going to class and home at practice, to go to competitions, to achieve and win things. And school life and home life was very much, that was me, and I was driven to it, and I loved doing it, and I enjoyed competing and working hard and putting myself on the stage and kind of seeing what that was going to be. And that kind of led me into, I got to the end of year 12 and went to Melbourne, the University of Melbourne, to study chemical engineering, and I kind of kept my dancing all going at the same time. And I think, but getting into my 20s, there's a whole story probably there. But as I got towards the end of my 20s and into my 30s, I'm now 41, and there's been this real unraveling and rewriting of that narrative I had in my head about who I was and what I was doing and why I was doing it and what it was for. There's been a real kind of like rewriting that story, I think, is the way to look at it, and not judging it as good or bad, or not regretting anything or anything like that, but just kind of reflecting there, and what is it that I'm going to take out of those experiences going forward in my life. And so that to hear you say that you didn't know that I had won those dancing championships, it's funny to me, and it makes me feel like I've really achieved that adjustment in that narrative to a certain extent, because in the big, there are people I know that that's all they know of me. They know that's what I did, and that can feel, I mean, that's lovely, and it can be very humbling, but it's also quite restrictive and narrow in the perception that they have of me. So I love it that you didn't know that, and that hasn't defined me to you. Like, super, I love that.
I mean, I've always known you as like a Highland dance enthusiast, and what's the word I'm looking for? A bit like a sort of tradition breaker almost. Like you really want to shape things up a bit, and that's always been how I see you. Like you're just trying to push things a bit in a different direction, but still loving the core of Highland dancing. So, and that's what I kind of love about seeing you grow in what you do. So that's how I see you. I knew you've done competitions and you've won a lot, but I've never knew it was 50s. I'm like, whoa, gee whiz, you know.
Yeah, but even that idea that I want to do it differently and shift it a little bit, I am such a black and white thinker, and I'm such a conformist to rules and respecter of rules and boundaries and things like that, and so the Highland dancing space is very special and very, I feel very privileged to be in it. But you're right, there is that part of me that just simply wants it to be even better. And I can see, I've experienced some of its limitations, and I've some of its frustrations, and some of the things that have felt, smothering and made me feel small. I've experienced some of those, and just want to be a part of helping that not to be the same space for other people in the future. So again, the bit you see is the bit of me that's channeling the, how do we simply do this differently? Like, it's not like it's bad or good or anyone's wrong or right or anything like that, but just how do we give everyone a voice, and how do we give everyone an experience to be able to become their best in it, versus the narrows that sometimes feel quite restrictive to people by themselves.
Yeah. And I love that. It's like inclusion, but in a different way, maybe. Excellent. So I just thought about Highland dancing, and I'm actually wondering if some people have no idea what that is. And I only know it because I used to watch the Edinburgh Tattoo Festival, and obviously the wonderful ladies most of the time, but there might be some men as well, do this fantastic dancing. And I always wondered, how on earth have they got stamina to do it? So maybe you can just really quickly say, what is Highland dancing actually? Because everyone knows hip hop dancing and jazz dancing and all that, but what is Highland dancing? What where does it come from quickly, and what does it involve? Like, so people have a bit of an idea what it is.
Sure. Well, I think a common Highland dancing response is that it's not Irish dancing, so it's not River Dance or Michael Flatley or anything like that. So sometimes we have to dispel that we're different to Irish dancing. But the other part of it is too, the easy way to answer that is we spend a lot of time in kilts and with swords. So Highland dancing is the national dance form of Scotland. And so, what an amazing population of people, was it 5 million people or something like that live in Scotland, and how much the Scottish heritage has stretched across continents all over the globe. And, here I am in regional South Australia in Australia, and it was something that it's got strong roots in this area of Australia, and there's a few pockets around Australia where it's a very strong dance form that's done. So I saw it when I was 5 at the local show and just decided that's what I wanted to do. I had no Scottish heritage or anything like that. I just saw it and thought, yeah, I'm into that. My parents were like, really? I'm like, really? You don't want to go to ballet or tennis or something? No, Highland dancing's it. But yeah, it's the dance form of Scotland. So if you can imagine, as you say, Edinburgh Tattoo is a place where you see Highland dancing. But yeah, we compete. The dancers, many of the dancers came from like a war scenario. So our Highland fling we do was, put the shield on the ground and dance in jubilation at the end of a battle on the shield. Well, that's where the Highland fling came from. And the sword dance is that they laid their blades at the start of a battle to dance over the swords, and if they touched the blades, it was a bad omen for the battle ahead. So much of the dancing has really historical value, and in those scenarios, it for a long time was a male pastime. So the perception you have around stamina and strength and things like that is very true, because you're basically jumping up and down on one foot for a minute and a half to 2.5 minutes at a time. With the idea of being, the pillar stones of Highland dancing, ease, grace, strength, endurance, and so they're in the air, looking graceful and powerful and strong.
Wow, Wow, I've learned something. That's great. Thank you. Actually, yeah, I didn't know that there was like I wouldn't say a war dance, but sort of involved, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. Awesome. Now, right, let's dive into, we've already covered obviously music involved in, with Highland dancing, and it's part of like a ritual. So music was obviously very important because it was like the beat that you dance to that then might lead into battle, things like that. For you personally, though, is that the music you listen to away from your Highland dancing, or is there anything else you like listening to that kind of motivates you or inspires you or just keeps you going? Is there sort of one particular band, genre, whatever? Is there anything that comes to mind when I ask that question?
Yeah, it's interesting. Reflecting on that a little bit, I think when I was dancing a lot myself, there's something. I mean, I have no Scottish heritage, but to have grown up dancing to bagpipes, and certainly as I got to higher levels of competition, but also I joined Oscott Australia, which is a performance Highland dancing group that travels all around the world from Australia. As I was exposed through Oscott Australia to, some of the world's best pipe bands and some of the world's best, military musicians and things like that, the feeling I get inside myself for the sounds of bagpipes and things. I mean, for anyone who's watched the Edinburgh Military Tattoo, but if you've been there, when the mass bands play together, there's, I don't know if I've ever met anyone who is a little bit affected and stirred inside by the sound of that. So certainly when I was dancing, I listened a lot to bagpipe music, or things that kind of inspired movement in me. But as I've got older, and I certainly listen to it now when I'm choreographing things for some of my dancers that I teach, or things like that. But yeah, Lisa herself, like me myself, probably I don't listen to a lot of that music casually now. Like, it's more something that I do when I've got my dancing hat on. But I'm more. I mean, if you're talking to Lisa herself, I'm a massive REM fan, I have to tell you, and have been. I got introduced to REM when I was about 16, I think. So they'd already been around the place for a while, but I kind of came in at that Green album, maybe you had been Automatic for the People. Like, I kind of came in at that point, which when they were quite commercially big. But probably, and not that the commercial part of it wasn't the bit that attracted me, but I made a friendship in year 11 that he was right into REM. So he kind of would make me mixtapes of REM songs and things. And I was like, oh, yeah, yeah. And then little by little, it was just this real connection with that band and with Michael Stipe himself. And I think that it's funny to me how, like, it's just carried on ever since, like what you can be into when you're 16 and suddenly it's that particular voice or that particular song has a way of pulling you firstly back into that, but also the way you reinterpret it as you get older.
Yes, yeah, I agree. It's funny how some artists stay with you and they keep sort of coming in and out of your life, but they never leave you. So
yeah.
And yeah, REM, I remember well when they became sort of really, like you said, commercialized almost. They were massive, weren't they?
Yeah.
And I think REM for me is one of those bands I never really got until I was like a certain age, because they're probably so, what's the word for it? They really love their art and craft, how they do it. So I think it can be really hard to get into at a certain age. I mean, the other band that I think about, which I really love these days, is Talking Heads. Way back, I hated them. I could not understand. I just didn't get the music. But now I'm like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
So it's similar to REM for you, probably. Like,
Yeah, and that's the thing. It wasn't the commercialness of REM. Like, I probably at the time almost rebelled against that. Like, I think at the same time, I remember being at high school and everyone in my class was into Smashing Pumpkins and Nirvana and Pearl Jam. And I almost refused to be into them because it was like I didn't mean to consciously rebel against what everyone else was liking, but I was like, I didn't, I had this thing about not wanting to just like it because everyone else did like it. So at the time I got myself I was right into Harry Connick Jr. Like Harry Connick Jr. was advertised on TV here, like back when we had like 2 TV stations that we could watch. And they were advertising this Harry Connick Jr. album. I'm like, I want that. And I went through this whole suite of, I think I had about 6 Harry Connick Jr. albums that I just adored. And it was like my rebellion against Smashing Pumpkins and Nirvana and Pearl Jam. But in all of that, random. But in all of that, now I love them. And same with REM. Like when they were, like I wasn't attracted to them when they were commercial, but through this friend that would send me these tapes, all of a sudden, as I got older too, I could hear them, and I could hear, and I didn't necessarily know a lot about them at the time, like them personally as people, but certainly heard them, what they were saying in their music and the way they went around about that. And I had the opportunity in 2005 to see them live at Rod Laver Arena in Melbourne, and it was the single most fantastic thing I have ever seen. Where I had tickets, we were probably, let me imagine, we were probably, we were less than 15 metres from the stage, and we're on the ground. And I just, like Michael Stipe just is and became that person in my life that, when people say to you, if you could have a dinner party of 8 people, who would you choose? He's on my list of 8 people that I would choose to have at a dinner party. And to be able to see him less than 15 metres away clearly, and to be able to hear him live and the way he spoke and the way he behaved on the stage, like there was a point in the middle of, sorry, look, I'm fully recounting it now. There was the song Country Feedback, at the end of it, there's quite a long instrumental period at the end of that song, and he just curled up, like kind of half to the audience, half not, and just curled up against the microphone stand and just absorbed the music while the rest of the band and the guys assisting them were playing. And it was so powerful. Like it was just, and I looked at him and thought, how amazing was it for him to be in front of people, like there's 8,000 people there, and to be in front, to be the front man of a band that everyone was there, but for him to be so present in the music of what his band they were playing, and to be a passenger in that, even though he was at the front, like it was really remarkable to me. Like, I was a massive REM fan, and I went there, and it was better than I could have possibly dreamed for it to be. It was really sensational. Like, I'm so thankful I went that night. It was really great.
Wow. It does sound like he had a massive, massive impact on, I don't know, I'm just sort of thinking how you kind of carry yourself ever sort of, with what you're doing in a way. Yeah. I feel like
it's funny, isn't it? Because I would never say that. Like, oh yes, my inspiration was Michael Stipe. Like that's not the way I would say it. But you're like, I think about it on like deeper than that. There's just something appealing to me, the way, like and I've almost deliberately not wanted to know a lot about him, like other than the words he chooses and the way he chooses to interact in the world. I feel respectful of absorbing him the way he presents. Like, I don't want to secretly know where he lives or secretly know, who his friends are. I don't want to know that. Like, I feel like what he gives, what I get from him is what he gives to the world, which is,
so basically just the artist, and that's all, and not sort of anything else, just what he creates and shows from that perspective.
And I think, as you say, I feel a similarity in that too. Like, there's a certain amount of the way I've been in my life and what I'm doing now. Maybe a little bit, but there's a certain desire to present what I can, but hold in private and have privacy around myself as well. You know, like I do,
Mm.
I think I respect that in what the way he's interacted at the level that, I mean, you know, I mean, let's face it, he's a global rock star. I mean, that's the character, that's who he is. But that, yeah, the human being behind that, I feel respectful of respecting the human being behind that too. And I suppose I'd like that in return. You know, I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
And I really love that, because a lot of the times people get too absorbed in it, and I think what many artists want to do is share that part of themselves, but the rest might not matter. So if you can just take that and it really helps and inspires you and it gives you something, then that's the core of it. We don't need to know anything else, really, do we? That's none of our business. So, you know, and that's what I find. Yeah, you know, that's the older I got, the more I realized that that's really the important bit. You know, I mean, I've had my phases where I was like boy band crazy and you had to know everything. And then when you get sort of in your 20s, you go, why am I even interested in that? That's not important. The music was, and the good times I've had and the friendships I've made, but not what that person had for dinner.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
things like that. So yeah, I love that you were able to do that straight away, because a lot of people can't.
Yeah, and it's fun, and I probably didn't even reflect that that's what I did before. Now we're having this conversation, but yeah, and it's a bit like, I'm going to digress. It's a bit like, you know, is it Eleanor Ferrante, the author, who isn't? She's written all those beautiful books, but we, the public, don't know who the author is, and I really love that too. Like, occasionally I strike an article about her where someone's gone through some rubbish of some person and in their bin outside their house, just said, this is who Eleanor Ferrante is. And I just, yeah, I realised that I just hate that need for people to put people in buckets. Like, we have to know everything about them, and we have to decide whether we like them or don't like them, or we agree with them or we don't agree with them. Or
Yeah.
I think I've always and maybe, you know, wow, I'm getting deep on myself. Maybe going back on that Lisa Barker, the dancing champion, it's a bucket. Like, it was true, like it was something that I did, and it was something that I, you know, passionately identified with, but it wasn't all me. You know, that wasn't everything about me, wasn't known through that lens. And so I suppose I feel the way I exist in the world is to try and respect people and not feel I have to understand everything about them and I have to know everything about them, and then I get to decide whether they're a good person or a bad person. Like, I just don't subscribe to that at all.
Yeah, I think we all could sort of
do
with a bit more of that, I think.
Yeah, well, it's probably, and again, I just feel that if I can respect other people that way, then I would like to think that attracts that kind of appreciation back the other way, and respect the other way.
Absolutely. Wow, REM, what a band. I must admit I only know a few songs, but the songs that I do know, I do appreciate that now, listening back to them, and I'm going, right, okay, well, I'm glad they were there when I grew up, because that was like part of the whole radio soundtrack. And that's the funny thing. I remember talking to Casey a couple of episodes back about how she did mixtapes in school and this and that, you know, taping from the radio. And I know I did that. I even requested songs on the radio, and then you stood, oh, it's my name, I've got a tape. But is that something you did as well, like back in the days? Is that how you sort of created your own soundtrack to your teenage life or 20-year life? I don't know.
No, that was a massive part of like my high school life, really. Like, the whole, I think there's something really lost in that experience that teenagers don't get now. Like, I mean, you know, sitting at my desk, I remember being in year 11 or year 12 and, you know, having afternoons of homework to do. Like, you know, I remember going to dancing in the morning, having lunch, and pretty much the rest of the day was homework. But I had this, you know, little stereo system off to the side, and I had the, you know, the record, the play and the record down, and the pause button on, and just vaguely, you know, doing my work on the radio. And the moment something started that I liked, just launching across and, you know, taking the pause button off and catching it. And then, you know, and then when the radio DJ or whoever would talk mid-song, you'd be like, oh, you know, I've got to rewind and fix that again. And yeah, like a lot of time and effort was put into those tapes.
Absolutely, yes. Right, the next, well, yeah, our teenage years, we probably could go on about that for God knows how long, and what we did and what, you know, we think young people miss out on these days, which they probably would disagree with us anyway, but that's okay. We can't always agree on everything, but it's nice to reminisce sometimes. Now, from a sort of business and life perspective, is there any, apart from REM, is there anything you use to help you maybe get focused in, or, you know, do you meditate? Do you use music to meditate? Is there anything that helps you at certain times during your day when, you know, your work's happening or life's happening? Is there anything you sort of use to help you just make it better or more focused? Do you use music in that way?
Yeah, I'm certainly, and I, you know, I'll thank you for re-inspiring this kind of thought in my head in this last couple of months. But I think, you know, after that kind of high school, university kind of time, and, you know, you get out of your mid-20s and get on with life, and I think I moved away from regularly listening to music for any other reason than, you know, I had to do something. Like for dancing, I had to do something with it, or whatever, or I was driving, so I had some music on then, but that was kind of it. But this last few months, I've revisited using music. Firstly, I find that period of the morning when you get up, but you've got some beds to make, and you've got your shower to get done, and you've got your, you know, your washing to put out, and, you know, that kind of adult morning day
Yep.
that many of us have. I find I find that quite frustrating. Like, I just want to get on with the day, and sometimes it feels like Groundhog Day. Like, oh no, here I am again in the shower doing the same thing that I do every day to try and get the day going. And I found that I have been using music in that space again. And so while I'm in the shower, I just go and get my, you know, speaker, and I get my phone, and my husband and I are catching up on this year. Like, we don't watch very much TV, but our television catch up this year has been to watch The Blacklist from the start, right, all the way through. And so we just caught up with that this year, right? But the thing about The Blacklist is the music. Like, I love the music on The Blacklist. So I've gone looking for the album from The Blacklist, and also there's a playlist on, you know, on whatever streaming service I'm using. But and it's this. Someone's gone and found music that's been played in every episode of The Blacklist for the last 7 seasons, and it is a sensational playlist of music. So I put it on. I use it as a bit of an intuition thing. Like, I just put it on shuffle, and sometimes I get these really dark and brooding sequences, and sometimes I get these light-hearted, happy sequences. And it's funny to me, like, how much I feel like the playlist generation out of shuffle is like intuitive on how I'm feeling. So that's been
interesting.
Yeah, sure. That's been fun. But also too, I suppose the other part of it is when I'm working now, I have gone and I've had some time because my daughter's 6, and I've chosen this year to homeschool her. But as she's got older, you know, those periods of time where I've got maybe an hour I can sit in front of the computer now uninterrupted, or, you know, to get on with whatever work I'm doing or whatever. And I've kind of gone back into that high school head space of just putting music on in the background, something, you know, and having it fairly loud and enough to kind of block out other stuff that I might be doing. And I find my concentration in that time is great. And it reminds me of, you know, it worked for me when I was 16 or 17 or 18. So why doesn't it work for me now? And simply it does. It does work for me now. So there's been a lot more music in this house this last few months.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I love to hear that. I love that. Because, yeah, I think especially this year, I think we can use any tool available to make us feel a bit better and more positive. Yeah. There's enough not so nice stuff going on out there. So
absolutely. I've done a lot more. I've really settled into morning meditation and stuff like that too. This last probably 4 or 5 months, and I'm finding that there's some music around that I don't play it necessarily while I'm meditating, but I play it afterwards.
Oh,
Sometimes in that kind of shower morning prep kind of time, I just play that music, and I find it quite settling. Or sometimes I play it in the background when Isla and I are doing our homeschool time in the morning, and I find with her it having that background, like we Sacred Earth is the group that we're listening to at the moment, but I just put that on in the background, and I find it focuses us both a lot on what we're doing, and she settles quicker, and we get down to business and what we're working on quite quickly together. And I've just been kind of playing with that a little bit as well.
awesome. That's really cool. That you actually meditate and then use the music for meditation sometimes afterwards.
It's a bit
I love that.
random, but that's
Awesome,
yeah, that's
awesome. Well, maybe some good ideas for anyone that's watching or listening to maybe try it out. You never know, it might work. Who knows?
Or some feedback back to you to tell me that can help me out with what I'm trying to do, right?
Well, yeah, it's funny enough though, because I just sort of had a bit of a chuckle to myself, because when I interviewed Nash Mackey, my first ever interview, he actually did say that sometimes because he's a coach, and he says to his clients that sometimes they should meditate in silence to really hear what your mind and body has to say and not be distracted by music. So I thought when you said, oh yeah, I use it afterwards, I'm going, oh wow, I can start to see something happening here. So yeah, no, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah, and Birgit, I think the meditation space for me has I have really fought that. Like my brain, sometimes it feels like a firework. Like I feel like I'm sneaking up on controlling my mind, and it just bursts off to something else. And I felt that for a long time, I felt really angry about that and frustrated, and maybe I can't meditate, and what's wrong with me, and why is that the case, or I'm uncomfortable, my back's on, and all that kind of comes to me. And just this last few months, I've been able to access some kindness in myself in that. And also just someone said to me a couple of months ago that that is the practice, to notice that and just be kind with it and let that go and come back. And I find if I reflect, I think if I use music in that space, it's just, I feel like I'm just distracting my mind versus actually accepting what it's trying to do and just accepting how I feel. Like I'm finding that piece on acceptance is really working for me. So yeah, maybe in all of that then is why I then don't use the music till later.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I kind of get that. I do like a bit of background music to meditate sometimes, but I also notice that to be able to literally let go of anything that comes, music can be a bit of a magnet. So to be able to just let things go and just meditate, yeah, sometimes silence really is the better way to go, I think. So agree with you on that one.
Yeah,
definitely. Now, I love that chat. I think it was really different. Some really good thoughts on how to look at other people and how to use music, like, with your kids and in your business, and maybe go back to your teenage time and see what worked then and see if that still works now, no matter how old we are. Which kind of brings me to sort of one of the last questions I always ask anyone that comes on. And I know sometimes it's a bit tricky to answer, but we'll see where we go. If you would have to describe your business and what you do with one song, which one would that be and why? And I know that might be a bit of a struggle.
Oh, that's easy. You don't know.
Let me just.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, here's one I prepared earlier. No, not really. The probably, and something there's lots of things we haven't talked about, but the other voice that I connected with in my late teens was that of Jewel. I don't know whether you remember Jewel. She was young, and I think she's from Alaska or something like that. And she was I think she was 16 or 17 when she first released this song. The song, I think You Were Meant for Me or something, I think it was called. And I remember kind of being taken, like she'd written the song and she sang it herself, and she had this unique quality about what she was doing at the time, and kind of hit that. Her first album was quite commercial, and it had commercial success, whatever. And then she kind of, there's a bit more stuff, and then she's kind of gone off into the background a bit more. But I've for a long time always kept, like, I kept coming back to that first album and then the second album. And I think I ended up with the first 3 albums before I, kind of moved away from her a little bit. But there's a song on there on one of her albums. I can't remember if it was the second album or the third album, honestly. But it's called Life Uncommon. And I remember just liking the song when I was younger. But when I revisit Jewel, and I do at times, there's a few artists that I've got, multiple albums of on my phone or, on my iPad or whatever. And she's one of them. But that song, as I've got older and as I've known a little bit more, and maybe a little bit more about her in anything that she shared and stuff, the message in that song about, I don't know, I think that it makes me feel, and that's why in current tense, it makes me feel okay about wanting a life uncommon. Not to say that anyone else's life isn't right or is right or not, there's no judgment in that, but feeling like being uncommon or unusual is okay, and to actually pursue that versus feeling apologetic for it or feeling like you've got to learn to fit it in with a common life and then you can have a fun, like to actually pursue a life uncommon. I think I just love that phrase. I love, and she sings about, there's a line in the song where she says, no longer something, I may be phrasing her, like paraphrasing her incorrectly, but she's something like, no longer lend your strength to that which we wish to be free from. And I've found that very, like, at the time when I learned it as a younger, I mean, it was just words, but as I've got older, the more I realise that I don't have to give my strength to that I wish to be free from. I mean, exactly what she says, and that's a choice I can make. That I'm not a victim in just the ball rolling down a hill that I can't do anything about it. I can actually choose that. And, and I found that very powerful in my own self as well as what I'm trying to do in my workspace.
Wow, that's that's awesome. I've actually had a look at the lyrics before we came on just to make sure that, I've got it in my head, and I must admit, I've never heard that song before. And I listened to it and I thought, wow, how fitting. It's not judgmental. It's just saying go your own way, go in your own lane, and it's not wrong.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I love it. I love that song choice. Really good.
And
thanks for actually bringing that song into my world, because I had no idea it existed. So.
I just love it that it, I had. And I feel joyful about it because I had a intuitive connection with it when I was about 18 or 19, like that. I knew of it from then. But just to kind of circle back on it now I've got older, and just to have some intuition around how I've wanted to become in my life more, and to have that song reiterate that for me and kind of underline it and remind me that I actually knew back then what I need to know now. It's just been there waiting for me all that time. It's cool.
That's actually kind of amazing that a person that doesn't know you and you kind of don't know them, and they've written that song, and that's been there when you were like 18, 19 or something along those lines, and now it's back there. I find that almost mind-blowing that one person writes that and then it means so much to someone else. And it just fits for their life as well. Yeah. That's for me something sometimes it's so hard to comprehend. It's like the universe, you can just tell we all are connected somehow, and that's sometimes it's just like so mind-blowing.
Yeah. And the connection to really land 22 years later. Like that's the bit too. Like it's got that Doctor Who leaving clues for yourself in time space continuum about it, doesn't it? Like, it's just
Yes. I know, that's what I find so mind blowing. Is like, you know, like it was just waiting to come out again of that CD cover. When you are ready at that exact moment, you open it up and there it is, and you just go, oh my god. Yeah, unbelievable. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. I think we could have probably talked on for another 2 hours or so about all this, but I think we'll sort of close off shortly. Is there anything else that comes to mind? But I think, you know, ending it with Jules' song and that message, I think that's a really, really great ending to our chat.
Yeah. And Birgit, I just want to say to you, this is a special space. Like, you should like be very proud of what you're doing here already, but be really brave with what you're doing, because I think you know it. I think you know there's something special here, but absolutely there is. And I just commend you for the opportunity, and thank you for the opportunity to talk with you. But yeah, like I would love. I love watching fly with you because it's lovely.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, thank you. You make me blush. Well, we'll leave it at this before I get too red. So thanks so much for coming on, Lisa. I really enjoyed it. For anyone watching and listening, thanks for watching this. We're gonna obviously put Lisa's details somewhere on our YouTube channel, and otherwise, you know, you can find Lisa. Just Google the Elemental Dancer and all her contact details will come up. And that's it. Thanks so much for tuning in, for watching, for listening, and there will be another episode of the Living on the B-Side podcast coming to you very soon. For now, thanks so much, and as I always say, rock on everybody. Until next time, thanks so much. Bye.